Hi folks, welcome to Gettysburg. Welcome to the Farnsworth House. My name is James, this is my colleague Dave. Today you're going to experience what it was like to be a soldier in the Civil War. Our tour is called In Their Shoes. What we do is it's kind of set up like the Titanic Museum, if you're familiar with that. When you go to the Titanic Museum, they give you a boarding pass of an actual person who was on the Titanic. And then at the end of the museum, you get to see if you drowned or you survived. Well, we do the same thing. You will be issued a haversack, which is a personal bag that they carry their belongings in. Inside that, there is a hat that you can wear if you feel like wearing it. It'll be either blue or gray. So you will be portraying either a Union soldier or the gray hats for the South. You will also have a picture and a name of an actual soldier that fought here during the Battle of Gettysburg, which is tomorrow, the 151st anniversary. You will also get to carry a wooden rifle to get the feel of what it was like. Now at the end of the tour, you will get to see your outcome. Just like the real soldiers, unfortunately, some of you will not make it. So some of you will survive and some of you will not. It doesn't matter what color hat you get because there's casualties on both sides. So what we like to do is divide the group in half. I will start out in the attic of the house where the 44th Georgia actually was using it as a sharpshooter's den. We will take the other half over to our campsite and talk about camp life. And then halfway through the tour, we'll switch off. We'll go into the attic with this group, and I'll take my group over to the camp. So with that said, we'll get started. I need to take, since I have 2 guests with me filming today, I'm going to take 10 of you and he's going to take the rest. In the meantime, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is James. I live here close to Gettysburg. I live in Littlestown. It's been my 25-year dream to live here. I'm from Southern Ohio, a little town called Hillsboro, which is an hour south of Columbus and an hour east of Cincinnati. So all my family is back there. I live here with my girlfriend and her 2 kids. And we work together at our other job, which I will be going this afternoon right after this tour. So it makes a long day. I'm up from about 7:30 in the morning till about 1 or 2 in the morning. And I'm a nursing assistant in a nursing home here in town. So I'll change out of this uniform and get in my other one. I've been coming to Gettysburg since I was a small child. My dad set me on a cannon when I was about 7 years old. I've been hooked ever since. I've been a Civil War nut ever since. When I was 16 and was able to drive, I drove here at least twice a year. I was at the 125th anniversary, the 137th, the 141st, the 150th, and last year, and now I'll be at the 151st. I'm hoping I can make it till the 200th. But I don't know. I know I'm going to try to make it to the 175th anyway. Now, I don't reenact anymore. I started reenacting when I was 15. I retired a few years ago because I'm too old and fat to run across the battlefield. So now I do living history and I do these tours. In living history, I go out to the battlefield sometimes on the weekends and talk to tourists for free. I portray Irvin McDowell, who was the overall commander for Lincoln. He was Lincoln's first general. I'm known as the bad luck general because I went up against Stonewall Jackson at Manassas and lost. So I was replaced soon afterwards. But anyone that went up against Stonewall Jackson didn't have much of a chance of winning anyway. With that, I'd like to ask where some of you are from. Minnesota. California. Texas.
Right beside Shiloh.
Shiloh. I've been to all them places. Walking Tall.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I'm from Jackson.
Yeah. I've been out there. I've visited him and Pauline's grave. And
You make it to Parker Crossroads?
huh?
You make it to Parker Crossroads?
No.
It's right up there too.
Wow. I went to Shiloh. That's a neat battlefield. But I've been to all them states. I was stationed in the Navy in California. I went to boot camp in San Diego. I was one of the last groups to go through there, and before they closed it down. And then I was stationed in Alameda later on in the Bay Area. Well, with that, we'll get started. We'll go issue your haversacks and rifles, and we will meet out in front of the house, and we'll start the history of the house, and I'll show you what the town looked like, and we'll talk about the town at the time. We'll go into the attic, talk about what happened up there. And together up here close, Got a lot of Yankees, that's good. Is everyone a Yankee? One rib. 2 ribs.
At least I'm honest about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna give you a little history of the house. The back portion of the house, the wooden cart, was built in 1810 by a gentleman and his family named John McFarland. He also built the front of the house in 1833, just 30 years prior to the Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st, 2nd, 3rd of 1863. He was a banker who would end up losing the house to the bank. The second owners of the home was the Sweeney family, of Harvey Sweeney, his wife Catherine, and daughter Elizabeth. They would own it during the time of the battle. The only thing is, none of them was here at the time of the battle. Mr. Sweeney was a businessman and ran a butchery shop out of the back of the house, which was real convenient at the time. We was a pretty prominent town for the time. We actually had gas-lit light lamps on the street. We had a carriage factory. We also had a tannery shop. And we had a brick factory, which sat right where the elementary school across the street is today. It was known as the McGreary Brickyard. So most of the original homes here, the bricks, came from that brickyard. Mr. Sweeney was in Indiana doing business at the time. It was a town of about 27 or 2,800 citizens. After the Battle of Gettysburg, it's said that more people died here than had ever lived here. We had 51,000 casualties in 3 days. That's wounded, killed, missing, or captured. You could fill up the New York Stadium with people. That's how many casualties we had here. Now, he was out in Indiana, like I said. His wife, Catherine, and daughter Elizabeth was up on High Street with other family members for safety, because that's what the citizens did when they seen soldiers coming to town from both sides. They knew something bad was about to happen here. So they either fled town to cities like Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, or they got with other family members for safety. Now, on the first day of the fighting, they were pushed from the first day's part of the battlefield, which is out this way on Chambersburg. The Confederates pushed the Union Army to East Cemetery Hill, which is directly behind you. Now, the house here was occupied by the 44th Georgia. They was using this attic window up here for a sharpshooter's den. They were shooting at the Union soldiers on East Cemetery Hill. Now, if you was watching the movie when you come down here, they usually show you Gettysburg. If you remember General Lee saying to General Ewell, take that rocky hill if all practical. He was talking about East Cemetery Hill. But it was mixed orders at the same time, because he said, take that rocky hill if all practical, but please do not engage if all possible. Well, the Union Army had already occupied that part of the battlefield, which formed a fishhook formation, which ran from Copp's Hill all the way to the Round Top. It had about 90,000 Union soldiers stretched out on that. It was all high ground. That's what would decide this battle, the Union having the high ground. This was also the biggest battle fought on the Western Hemisphere. This would be the turning point of the Civil War. After this battle, we know who was going to win, because after that it was a war of attrition. Once Lee's army retreated back across the Potomac into Virginia, we basically wore them down with Sherman's March to the Sea, the Anaconda blockade, which blocked ships from getting supplies to the south. So that's what happened. When they came back to the house, it was a bloody mess. Most of the homes here during the battle and after the battle became field hospitals. Our main dining area became a field hospital. They were doing amputations in there. You can see there was over 100 bullet holes in the side of the house from the Civil War, in the original bullet holes. When Mrs. Sweeney went into her front parlor, there was still limbs laying there of arms and legs that they had sawed off. They had used all her bed sheets, all her clothing for bandages, so it was a bloody mess. They went to the cellar of the house where they found 5 to 6 dead Confederate soldiers, because that's where you stored bodies in the summer heat of July, because it was cooler down there. It said that Mr. Sweeney actually turned one of the soldiers over and his face stuck to the dirt floor. So you can imagine the carnage. Now, to give you a better picture of what happened here and what the town might have looked like, Any home here that has the brass plaque that says Civil War Building 1863 was here. So this home was here, of course. Right across the street we have Mr. G's Ice Cream. That's the finest ice cream in Gettysburg. That home was also here. It was occupied by the 7th and 8th Louisiana Tigers. Just like the college team, the LSU Tigers. That's where they got their name. We'll talk about those Tigers later. Right across from that house sat another home right here where the white picket fence was. It was known as the McCreary House. They were the ones that owned the brickyard, which sat where the elementary school is. Now the elementary school is being demolished, of course, because our government likes to waste money. There was nothing wrong with that school. They're building a new elementary right behind it. Up this way on this side of the street, there's a house that you can't see right now, but when we cross the street, you'll be able to see it. It's known as the Rupp House. It's a beige house with a bunch of gables. Now that house was occupied by Union soldiers, which is only about 30 yards from here. So you can see how close a range the fighting really was. Up past the 1863 and on the left toward East Cemetery Hill, there's a small brick house that juts out just behind it. It's known as the Jenny Wade House. Now that actually wasn't her home, that was her sister's home, Georgia's home. Georgia McClellan was her name. Her husband was off fighting the war too. It was a duplex. One family lived on one side and Georgia and her family lived on this side. Now the other family, of course, wasn't here during the battle. The reason she was there is because she had just given birth to a new baby boy. So her sister Jenny and her mother was there helping take care of her sister. Now Jenny was also baking bread for the Union soldiers, which was up there, and serving them water. These guys that were in this attic window thought it might be a Union headquarters because they seen all these Union soldiers going in and out and around the house. So one soldier from the 44th Georgia took aim at the side door, at the doorknob. The bullet passed through two doors where Jenny thought she would be safe. She was behind the side door and the door that divided the kitchen from the bedroom. She was bent over her dough tray, kneading dough for the Union soldiers, baking them bread. When the bullet passed through both doors, hitting her in the left shoulder blade, piercing her heart, lodging in her front corset, she fell dead instantly. She was only 20 years old. She was the only citizen killed during the battle. Now she's buried in Evergreen Cemetery, which is right up the hill where all them green trees are. Same cemetery that Lincoln did his Gettysburg address, our national cemetery. She has a flag flown over her grave 24 hours, 7 days a week. There's only one other American woman who has that honor, and that's Betsy Ross. That's the story of Jenny Wade. Now anything in between these homes here was known as no man's land, because anyone stupid enough to step out into the street was surely going to be shot or killed. You gotta remember, this is part of the battlefield too. It's not just where the monuments are. They fought right through town here. So with that said, we are getting ready to go up into the actual garret where the 44th Georgia was. There are a lot of stairs to climb, but there is handrails. Please take your time going up. And when we get up there, I will meet you. There's benches that you can sit on. We actually have a fan and air conditioner going to try to make it more comfortable. Now, if there's a bigger group, I like to call it butt hop, because I want to squeeze everybody in there as tight as I can. With a small group like this, it shouldn't be a problem. So let me climb the stairs. You follow me. When we get up there, we'll continue our tour. Also, for the tall people, please watch your head because it is low in the attic. I've smacked my own head a couple times, forgetting about how low it is. So if you please follow me, we'll get started. All right, I believe that's everybody. We'll continue the history of the house real quick. After the Sweeney family owned the home, it went to the George Black family. Now they would own it up to the early 1900s. Their descendant Sarah would finally sell it in 1972 to the current owners, the Schultzes. Now they ran it as a bed and breakfast just like it is today. We're the 5th most famous haunted bed and breakfast in America. We're the 13th most haunted bed and breakfast in America. We have 13 spirits that reside here. Not all soldiers. If you notice the little toys up here, we have a little spirit named Jeremy. He's about 8 years old. He's only the size of a 5-year-old. He has blonde curly hair and blue eyes. I've seen him. I've interacted with him. I've heard him laugh out loud. I was a non-believer till I started working here. I've had so many experiences, I know they exist. He was hid out in front of the home in 1855. They were playing a game that children played in the 19th century called horse tag. They would run from the street, tag the horses as the carriages went by, and run back to the street. Unfortunately, when Jeremy did that, he slid under and was trampled by the horses. He was carried into the Sarah Black room here, into our bathroom, which was the nursery at the time. His father was holding him when he died, and the doctor told him, "I'm sorry, sir, there's nothing we can do." Some of us believe the reason he's here is the whole time his father was holding him, he was saying, "Jeremy, please don't leave me, stay here." Now the wild and ironic thing about that is his dad died elsewhere, but his spirit came back here and he's with Jeremy now today. And they're both here. Them are 2 of the 13 spirits that are here. We also have soldiers that died up here in the attic. So I can tell you it's real. Sometimes we have paranormal activity on my tours like this in the daytime. You just never know when they're going to show themselves or be interactive. Now, when Mr. Schultz bought the place, there were 3 bids. There were 2 high bids and a low bid. He got the low bid. The reason was the 2 high bids was Exxon Gas and Dunkin' Donuts. They were going to tear the house down. Sarah didn't want that. She wanted to preserve it because it was a part of history and a part of Gettysburg. Everything up here is original. The rafters, the wooden floorboards, the horsehair plaster walls. The only thing he had to replace was the chimney. It was kind of broken up. If you notice the beams, they have Roman numerals written on them. That's because at that time they would pre-cut the wood to match. You can see the wooden pegs that hold them together. I really like the construction in the 19th century because it was meant to last. The floorboards are also original, different sizes of wood because you would use the leftover lumber for the floorboards of the attic because generally you wouldn't have family members up here. It was used as storage space. The window to my left is the actual window that the 44th Georgia was shooting out of. You can see there's a small bullet hole above the window. Of course, it's a lot bigger now because it's eroded with time and weather. They were lying on their stomachs there, shooting out the window, keeping up a continuous fire. As they would fire their weapon, they would pass it back. A loaded rifle would be passed up to them so they could keep up firing at East Cemetery Hill. Now, we really believe that the bullet that killed Jenny Wade came from here because the trajectory lines up perfect with the attic window to the side door. It's about a 400-yard shot. Now, we believe 5 to 6 Confederate soldiers probably died up here. As you can see, it's a low space. They were lying on their stomach. They were probably receiving head and chest wounds, which were killing them. Now, what do you think they did with the bodies? They dragged them from that area to the corner right behind my friend Jack there. That's where they piled the bodies up. We get a lot of paranormal activity back in that corner sometimes. I've been telling that same story to my group just like you when I go to right back in that corner. I said, just like he said, that's pretty like. About 2 months ago, I had a group up here, and there's a man hollered in that corner in agony and pain, real loud. We knew it was up here with us because everybody looked back to that corner. So things happen. But them are other stories, and them are other tours you can take at nighttime. We do ghost tours here. We do a ghost hunt, so if you're ever back in town, please take one of our tours. We're the original ghost tours in Gettysburg, and everyone else started doing ghost tours also, but we're the originals. Now you see there's a showcase behind me. 90% of this stuff came from the Battle of Fredericksburg in Virginia. The other 10% came from East Cemetery Hill right up here in Gettysburg. Now since we're talking about soldiers, that's what we're going to do and what it was like to be a soldier. Now keep in mind this was for North and South. They had collar insignia. The collar insignia stood for what kind of unit they were in, and this was on both sides. The guy down there at the very end is wearing red insignia. That means he's an artilleryman. He was on the cannon crew. Now there's 2 types of cannons out there. You have the black ones and the greenish colored ones. The black ones are known as Parrott rifled cannons. They were actually rifled. They were good up to 2 miles. they shot these projectiles that look like giant bullets known as 10-pounders. Now, keep in mind these guys went to school to learn how to do this. It is said that they were so good they could take one of those rounds at 1.5 miles and put it in a second-story window of a home within 2 shots. That's how good they were. Now, the greenish-colored cannons out there were good up to 1.5 miles. They were smoothbore. They were like a giant shotgun. So that's what they were used for. They fired the solid shot and the canister shot. The guy here in the yellow, he's wearing yellow insignia. That means he was a horseman, cavalry, either mounted or dismounted cavalry. They had both. Us infantry, we had the blue background, just like the gentleman standing here. And then the medical corps wore green. That was their collar insignia to let people know they were with the medical corps. Also, keep in mind you had different kind of units, just like the LSU Tigers. They're named after Louisiana Tigers. You had the guy, Dave, my buddy, you seen his uniform, funny looking uniform? They're known as French Zouaves. Now they weren't actually French soldiers, they were American soldiers. We adopted that uniform from the French. They were elite fighting force. You can see another one right there with the red pants and the turban. He's also a Zouave soldier. The first famous group of Zouave soldiers was led by Colonel Ellsworth. He was a personal close friend of Abraham Lincoln and one of the first casualties of the Civil War. He was visiting Lincoln and his family in 1861 at the White House when he looked across the Potomac and seen the flag of secession flying high above a hotel. So him and 12 of his men decided to go across and take it down. As he was carrying the flag down the stairs of the hotel owner was a secessionist, shot him dead. At the same time, one of his men bayoneted the hotel owner and shot him in the face and killed him. There's a great loss to the Lincoln family. He was like an uncle to Tad and Willie. He even gave them little uniforms that they pranced around the White House in. It's a known fact that the kids would actually have goats drawn carriages through the White House, taking animals in the White House. Lincoln let it happen because he said their kids let them play. So they would run around with goats and carts and act like they were soldiers in the White House. Now the guy at the very end that looks like a pirate's got the blue and white striped pants. That's your Louisiana Tiger. We're going to talk about them more when we cross the street because they have a very interesting story. Now the guy here with the tall hardy hat, it's known as, in the single-breasted frock coat. They adopted that hat to be recognized as the Iron Brigade. They got their name at the Battle of Antietam in the cornfield. When McClellan asked another officer, who are them boys fighting in the cornfield? He said, them are Wisconsin, Illinois, and Michigan boys. He said, well, they fight like iron, so the name stuck. They become the Iron Brigade. That hat had one side folded up with a brass heart to hold it and a great big black ostrich feather. So when people seen them, they said, oh, that's the Iron Brigade. Unfortunately, at the Battle of Gettysburg on the first day, they had 85% casualties. So after that first day, they were practically no more as a unit. And of course, the war would go on for 2 more years after this battle. And there's some other things I like to talk about. Now, as soldiers, as you're sitting right now, shoulder to shoulder in 2 ranks, that's the way you would fight. We were using what was called Napoleonic tactics. People often ask me, well, how could they fight like that? How could they go across the field, an open field at cannons and artillery and rifles and not run? Well, you got to remember, when you joined a unit, it was usually from your own hometown. You would be going off with cousins, uncles, your father, your brothers, your childhood friends that you had in school. So you didn't want to be marked as a coward, because if you went home with that same unit, you was going to be marked as a coward for the rest of your life. Plus, they were fighting for what they believed in on both sides. The Union was fighting to preserve the Union. The South was fighting for states' rights. So, some of these boys had never been away from their small towns. They thought it'd be a great adventure to go off and see the countryside. But then when they seen their buddies and uncles and stuff getting killed right beside them, it wasn't so much fun anymore. Now, the first thing you're going to come across when you're going across the battlefield is this piece right here. It's known as solid shot. It was actually designed to take out other artillery pieces, but it could also be used against you as the infantry. What the artillery would do is fire this right in front of you and skip across the ground just like a rock skipping across water. Well, this is going to take out anything it comes in contact with. Have you seen the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember one of these taking off legs as it was bouncing across the battlefield? That's actually what it would do, and it would keep going. If it bounced up and hit you through the chest, it's going to come out your backside. It's going to take off your head if it hits you in the face. You no longer have a head. So that's what this was used for. The next piece that you would deal with is this one. It's made of iron. It's hollowed out in the center. Right here in this groove set the fuse. The fuse is the little brass thing that's on the other cannonball there. You could turn it like a clock. You could set it at 8 seconds, 7 seconds, 9 seconds, whatever you wanted. So these guys knew what time to set that fuse to get this blow up right over your head. But what's going to happen is this is going to break up into pieces of iron. But inside it's hollowed out. If you look at the one open down there at the end, it's got all kinds of little iron balls inside. So that's going to be coming at you too. The next thing you're going to come in contact with, I do not have. I plan on making one for Mr. Schultz to have on display. It's known as canister shot. The best way to describe it's like a giant coffee can. Inside of it you have canister balls, which are the bigger round balls in that bowl at the end. You can put 8 or 12 of those inside of it. It's like a giant shotgun shell. At the same time you can put glass or nails or anything else inside that canister shot. Sometimes they would load double canister shot. They'd load 2 rounds within 30, 40 yards. Now the next thing you're going to come in contact with is these guns. They were the first rifle barrels. Had a groove in the barrel to catch the bullet. The bullet it fired is known as a Manet bullet. It's French. The French guy invented it. Its name was Manet. We know it as the mini ball. That's all these little cone-shaped bullets here. It's 1 ounce of solid lead. It has grooves in it to catch the rifling of the barrel to make the bullet spin and be more accurate. Now these guns were good up to 1,200 yards. At 500 yards they were deadly, at a velocity of about 125 feet a second. Now, when these things hit the body or hit anything solid, they flatten out. Just like these pieces on top of this canteen, they've hit something. You can see how it flattens out. Now if you get hit in the head, chest, or stomach, guess what? You're probably going to die because we didn't have the technology to take care of that. Although some people survived and carried bullets in areas like that the rest of their life. I don't know if you got to the part of the movie on the way down here where Chamberlain gets shot in the sword. That, in true life, he actually took a bullet in the groin and he would carry that for the rest of his life. Now, some of the soldiers would get lead poisoning from the bullet being still in their body and die later. Now, if you got, the best thing they could do is give you a shot of whiskey and set you aside and hope that you survive. Stop the bleeding. That's about all they could do. Now, if you got shot in the arm or leg, guess what? The only thing we could do is amputate. Because unlike today, we can reset the bone with pins and plates. Back then, you didn't have the technology. They'd simply lie you on top of a attic door or a dining room table, and it took about 2 minutes to amputate that arm or leg. Now, we didn't have antibiotics. We didn't know about bacteria. Penicillin wouldn't be invented until the early 1900s. Didn't have a lot of painkillers. We did have morphine, but it was rarely used. And when it was used, soldiers got addicted to it after the war and would die of overdose. What we did have is whiskey, chloroform, and ether. Or the whiskey was just to relax you. The chloroform and ether would hopefully make you pass out when you breathed it in. Sometimes it didn't work. Have you heard the term bite the bullet? We actually have one. It's known as a pain bullet. If you look right by those dominoes, it looks like a piece of chewed up gray bubble gum. It actually has teeth marks in it. That's an actual mini bullet. They would place one here, and one here, and tell you to bite down as they sawed your arm or leg off. The orderlies would hold you down. Like I said, it took 2 minutes. They would start with a big knife. They would cut 3 flaps of skin beyond the wound. Then they would cut right where the bone was missing with a saw. Then they would cauterize that vein with a hot knife. They would take those 3 flaps of skin and put over the wound and sew them together with a piece of horsehair from the horse's tail. That's what they used as sutures. Wrap it up, set you aside. It took 2 minutes. But imagine having your arm or leg cut off while you're awake lying there and people's holding you down. That's what these soldiers went through. Wasn't a very pretty time. Then they would simply cart them arms and legs off and be burned or buried later. Now, if you was a Confederate soldier fighting here in the North, if you died, you're going to be buried in a mass burial pit with other Confederate soldiers. They didn't have dog tags like we do today, so a lot of soldiers are unknown. Same way with the Union soldiers. If you was to die in the South, your outcome would be the same. Now, our Union soldiers here was taken to the National Cemetery and put with the states that they belong to. There's still bodies out there. We figure there could be 800 bodies buried out here in Gettysburg, but most of them are Confederate soldiers. Now, the ladies of the Confederacy in 1871 came back and retrieved most of those bodies. They're now buried in Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, Virginia. There's a big monument shaped like a pyramid made of big round rocks. There's about 1,200 bodies buried under there, and most of them came from the Battle of Gettysburg. But we know there's still bodies out there, because in the early 1990s, the last body was found when it fell out of the dirt at the railroad cut. The soil was eroded and a skull fell out the side of the hill. So we know there's still bodies out there in different places. A couple more things I'd like to talk about while we're up here. There's two funny shaped things that look like yard darts. Does anyone know what them might be? Them are the first hand grenades. They're known as Ketchum hand grenades. The Englishman who invented them's name was Ketchum. They're also called Ketchums because they have to land just like that to explode. So your enemy would see you pulling these out of your bag and getting ready to toss them. Well, of course, they would be ready. They'd have their jackets and blankets off. So when you throw them, they'd simply catch them in the blanket and throw them right back at you. So they're known as Ketchums for that reason. In front of that plate, there's a small ring. It has the initials AB on it. It's made of bone. We don't know if it's human bone or beef bone, but the Confederate soldiers would do that. It's known as a friendship ring or a memory ring. What they would do is take a piece of bone from the soldier that died and carve it into a ring to remember them, and their comrade would wear it. So we don't know if that's human or beef. It could be either one. But we know the guy's initials is AB because that's what's on the ring. But people think that's morbid, but if you remember, it's the 19th century. They actually did the things I'm sure you've seen with the hair, human hair, and they made wreaths in remembrance of family members. They did things like that back then. What we think is morbid today wasn't so morbid back then. Also, there's a gentleman I like to talk about before we continue our tour, and it's this gentleman here. I talk about him because he's the most hated Union officer in the entire Union Army. Does anyone have any idea who this gentleman is?
Sherman?
No. This is General Dan Sickles. I'm sure you've heard of him. He was, as you can see, with his arms crossed and a smirk on his face, you can see how cocky he was. He's a corps commander here with the New York unit. He was stationed at the bottom of Little Round Top. He was told to hold that position. Now, this gentleman before the war had no military experience whatsoever. He was a congressman from New York. Back then, if he was like that, like Chamberlain, he had no military experience. He was a college professor up in Maine. So if you had that significance, you could start your own unit. All you had to do was form 3 groups, 3 units, and you could be voted in as their commander. These officers would learn from other officers as they went. Now, of course, he didn't hold that position like General George Gordon Meade, the overall commander here, told him. He looked out at the peach orchard and thought it would be better ground because it was higher ground. It was higher ground from his perspective at the bottom of Little Round Top. But if you're standing on Little Round Top looking out to the peach orchard, it's actually the same level. Now, you can't blame this guy because in a prior battle he had the same situation. If he would have took his men to higher ground, he would have saved most of them. So General Meade, of course, kind of understood. But he also told him that he could have caused devastation in the Union Army, leaving a gap in the fishhook formation, which would have caused the Confederate soldiers to break through, and it would have been a different outcome here. Now, on his way back, he retreated with his men to his headquarters, which was a barn out there with a big cannon hole in it. That's where his headquarters was. When he retreated back, he was hit in the right knee by one of these solid shots, and his leg would be amputated right there. As the surgeons cut his leg off, he told them, "Please save my leg." Well, of course, the soldier said, "What does the general want with his lifeless leg. They said, well, don't worry about it. He's a general. Do what he says. So he put that leg into a barrel of whiskey, had it shipped to Washington, D.C. to be preserved. So after the war, he took his friends there and showed them his leg and would brag about losing it at the Battle of Gettysburg. It's also said that when he came out, he was smiling, sitting up in the cot, smoking a cigar, waving at his men, told them to keep fighting, that he would be all right. He is also the first American acquitted of murder. You've heard of Francis Scott Key that wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. His grandson was having an affair with this gentleman's wife. So in a jealous rage, he went into the street and shot him dead. Luckily, he had Stanton under Lincoln defending him, so he got off with temporary insanity. He was also a womanizer and a drunkard. He liked his whiskey. He liked his women. His wife was only 15 years old. He was in his 40s at the time. That's just the kind of gentleman he was. Now, there's no monument out here to this gentleman. There's only his New York unit monument, which sits out at the peach orchard. It's got 3 columns and an eagle on top. There's a flat disc in there. There's supposed to be a bust of his head put in there. The state of New York gave him $4,000 cash to have that done. That's a lot of money back then. What do you think he did with it?
Spent it.
He spent it on alcohol and women. The state of New York didn't like this gentleman very much after this. So after the war, he and his comrades and fellow enemies, which are now fellow Americans, would come for the anniversaries and visit the battlefield. Other officers from the South and even officers from his unit and other units would ask him, how does he feel about not having a monument out there to dedicate it to him? Because all these other generals have great monuments, they're high on horses and everything. He just shrugged his shoulders, shook his head and laughed, said, don't matter to me, the whole battlefield's my monument. So that's just the way, that's the kind of gentleman he was. Most hated Union officer in the entire Union Army. So at this time, we are going to go downstairs in front of the house, continue our tour. Please let me go first. I'm supposed to lead my tour. Take your time coming down the stairs. Watch your heads. If you want to take pictures while you're up here, feel free. All right, folks, we're getting ready to do the most dangerous thing in Gettysburg, and that's cross the street. There are some things here scarier than ghosts. They drive vehicles. They don't know what a crosswalk is. At night, these light up. That means go faster, beat the pedestrian. So please let me stop traffic before we attempt to cross the street.
Can we hit him with these?
Yeah, that works sometimes. Because if I get hit, you can roll me aside and the maintenance guy's here to take over because he's one of the tour guides also. But if you get hit, I'm probably not going to be working here much on the house I was talking about. It's the beige house right there with all the gables across the street. That's the one that was occupied by Union soldiers, so you can see how close the fighting was. And the McGrory house that's set here was with Confederate soldiers. Now you remember them Louisiana Tigers I was talking about. There was a lieutenant who was right in that doorway, the second story there. He would be killed right there. There's a table on the display at the Rupp House that has a bullet hole through it. He thought it would be safe to be behind it when the bullet passed through and hit him in the chest, kill also. When he heard the firing stop, he wanted to see what happened to his friend, the lieutenant. Before he could cross the street, he would be shot in the back. He said that there's so many bullets flying here, you can take a pail and scoop up lead off the street. So that just goes to show you. If any of you would like to look at the picture right there in front of the picket fence, it shows the original fence. And you can see all the bullet holes in the fence. It looks like Swiss cheese. Sure. So that gives you an idea of how many bullets was actually flying here. Also, where the Shell station sat, there was a hotel called the Wagon Wheel Hotel that sat there at the crossroads, at the split. Now them Tigers, remember them Tigers I was talking about? They were prisoners from the South. In 1863, the South got desperate for soldiers, so they went to the prisons. They said, look, come fight with us. And if you survive, you will get a pardon for no matter what you did. You gotta remember, these were murderers, rapists, arsonists. These guys were so tough, they fought among themselves. So that's the background of the Louisiana Tigers. They were prisoners from the South. Now 99% would fight for the Confederacy. And after the war, they deserve respect because most of them lived productive lives and never committed no more crimes after the military. Unfortunately, they didn't get pensions like the North did because the South lost. You win, you get something. You lose, you get nothing. So that's your Louisiana Tigers. There are also two big trees here, one to my right, one to my left. They're sycamore trees. They're known as witness trees because they witnessed the Battle of Gettysburg. They were actually here during the time. If you could cut through these trees, I'm sure you would find plenty of saws, lead, and shot still in these trees. Now this one to my left is more significant because I don't know if this is true, but the story goes as Lincoln passed the Farnsworth House right here on Baltimore Street on November 17th of that year, 1863, to do his dedication of the Gettysburg Address in the National Cemetery, that he stopped by this tree right here. He placed his right hand on this tree and talked to the crowd for about 10 minutes. So that's a piece of history you can touch that Abraham Lincoln touched. Unfortunately, if you want to touch where he did, it's probably a lot higher now. But that is a tree that he touched. Yeah. So from here, we're going to cross the street, go up the street just a little bit to our campsite. Then we'll continue our tour there.
All day, every day.
Right here on the benches in front of me. All right, we'll continue our tour right here. This represents a Sycamore encampment. Now, if I was standing here in July of 1863, I would probably be dead or captured right now. Because this was Southern territory. This was occupied by the Louisiana Tigers. There are three types of tents here I'd like to talk about. This little one here is the common soldier's tent. It's known as a dog tent. It would come in two halves. You and one buddy would carry each half. When you got to camp, you would button them together at the top, and the two of you would sleep underneath of it. Just like in today's military, you always have a mess mate or a tent mate. But that's what the common soldier would sleep under. That's probably what most of them were sleeping under here at the Battle of Gettysburg. Now this bigger tent here is known as an A-frame. It usually would sleep one person, which would be a first sergeant or a lieutenant. Now it was also used for the private soldier also, but it was used at campaigns and sieges like Gettysburg and Vicksburg, where they were going to be there for a long time. I've actually seen pictures of these tents with wooden floorboards inside, where the soldiers wanted to make it like home. They knew they were going to be there a while. But if the common soldier slept in that, you could sleep 5 to 6 soldiers in that one tent. Now you can see how disease would spread rapidly, because the main killer of the Civil War was disease. It wasn't actually the wounds they received. They would have diseases like smallpox, scarlet fever, chronic diarrhea. But the soldiers would actually make fun of some of these diseases. The South called chronic diarrhea the Virginia quick step. They had little jokes about it. Because you was quick stepping to the latrine. But there's stories I've seen where units didn't even get to go fight in the Civil War because their whole unit would die of disease before they could go into battle. Camp life was really boring too. If you weren't fighting and you were campaigning, there wasn't much to do besides eat, drill, and talk about loved ones at home, which they would do around the campfire. Some of them would write letters home. They would cook their food. The ones that couldn't read or write would have their buddies do it for them. Now the big tent over here is known as a wall tent or an officer's tent. A major general like myself would receive that for my own personal use. I would have my cot in there, my personal table, my wash basin. I would also have a desk interior where I could write my orders and sign payroll, which the common soldier received about $13 a month. The Confederate soldier received $11 a month. And a major general like myself would receive about $200 a month. It don't seem like a lot of money, but it was, when you consider you could buy a loaf of bread for like a quarter of a penny. So it was quite good money. Most soldiers would send their money home to their loved ones and keep very little for themselves. Now the ones that did keep it for themselves would gamble, because there wasn't much to do. You gotta remember, these are young boys. They were out for an adventure. They would have dice they would gamble with. They would have a deck of cards just like we do today, except it didn't have numbers on it. Like a two of hearts has two hearts in the card, so you know it's a two of hearts. Ace of hearts has just got one heart on it. That's how you would figure out. Now the only ones that did have was the face cards, like the Jack, King, they were actually face cards. They also had cockroach and lice races. It's a known fact that most soldiers had lice back then. Didn't get a bath like you do every day. You might get a bath once a week or once a month. Instead, you can smell an army coming a mile away. The only bath you're going to get is when you cross a river, creek, or a stream. Same place you're getting your drinking water from. You might not know what's going upstream. There might be men taking baths or horses crossing that water. So you're getting drinking water from that same creek. So you can see how dysentery would happen. Sometimes you couldn't cook your meat all the way through. You had a rations. You had a piece of salt pork, half-pound coffee, and what's known as hardtack crackers. You had about 3 of those biscuit crackers. It was made out of flour, salt, and water. The soldiers had nicknames for it. It was called teeth breakers, because you cannot bite into it without breaking your teeth. The only way you can eat this stuff is to soak it in your coffee or the grease of your frying pan. This stuff's so tough you can throw it against a brick wall and it's not going to break. It's like having a piece of pizza stuck through the The only problem with that is if it sit around too long, it would get flour weevils, which are little worms that get infested in it. So you'd soak it over your coffee and the worms would come out. You'd scoop the worms off and you'd drink your coffee. That's just the way it was. Now that food was to last you for 3 days. After that, you was on your own. Most soldiers would gobble that up the first day and go without for 2. But they would also forage. They would steal from farmers. If you was a southern soldier fighting in the north, you'd raid that farmer's land. You'd steal his chickens, his eggs, his pigs, anything you could get a hold of. You'd pick corn from the field. It might not be ripe. It might not be edible. You might not be able to cook it all the way through, but you can still eat it. That's what they went through. Now these lice and cockroach races I'm talking about, what you would do is you'd grab a cockroach or a lice off of you and you put it in the center of your plate you'd feed off of. It's a metal plate. First one's cockroach or lice off the plate would win. Now then they get caught cheating. Because when one of the other soldiers wasn't looking, one might go heat his plate up over the campfire, thinking that cockroach was going to move a little bit quicker. Unfortunately, they would sit there and sizzle and cook and they knew they were cheating. And they get in fist fights over that. Where'd that come from? Oh. There's a walnut. So they would get caught cheating. They would have fist fights. They would gamble on who was going to win those fist fights. Then they'd help each other up, dust each other off. These were all young boys. People respected each other back then. They didn't tell big lies. They tell what I call white lies. For example, you had to be 18 to carry the rifle. You know, when you were soldier, some of them would lie about their age. How old are you? 18 exactly. So that was the common age. But if you was 15, 16, you could lie. So what you would do is you'd stand out in front of the recruiter's office. Take a square piece of paper, take a pencil, write the number 18 on it. Stick it down inside your shoe. You go in the recruiter's office, the recruiter would look you right in the eye and say, "Son, are you over the age of 18? He'd be like, "Well, yes, sir, I stand on my word." Because he's standing over the number 18. So he's really not lying. He's on the white lie. That's just the way people were back then. A lot of sayings like going through all the red tape, that comes from the Civil War. Because after the war, you get your pension papers that you wrap in red ribbon. You have to get through that red ribbon to get to the good stuff. Sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite. That came from that time period. It was the tight beds, no tight beds, and the small mattresses. You have to beat your mattress every morning. So that's where that came from. Now, since we're in a Confederate camp, I'm going to talk about the flag that's flying around here. The most common flag everybody recognizes. That is not the national flag of the South like most people think. That's called the battle flag. All units carry that into battle with the Southern Army. So when you see that flag, most people think of two things. First thing they're going to think of is the Dukes of Hazzard and the General Lee. The next thing they're going to think about is hate groups like the KKK. But I want you to know that's not a hate flag. That's actually a religious symbol. That's known as the St. Andrew's Cross. It's an exclamation because one of Jesus' disciples, Peter, was crucified in an exclamation upside down. He said he wasn't worthy to be crucified the same way our Lord was. The red stands for the blood that Jesus shed. The white's for purity, the blue is for courage. Now amazingly, there are 13 stars on that flag to represent the 13 Confederate states. Actually, there were only 11 Confederate states that succeeded. They counted Missouri and Kentucky as Confederate states that also had Union troops in it. But at the same time, it's ironic because let's say the center star represents Christ, and the three going out each side is the 12 disciples. So next time you see that, don't think of it as a hate flag. The blue flag over here with the single white star, it's known as the Bonnie Blue flag. It's a morale flag. The star represents the South as one nation. That flag was generally flown in front of the Confederate flag. There's a song about it. I'm not going to sing it, but I will talk out the words. It says, "We are a band of brothers, made it through the soil, fighting for our liberty with justice, blood, and toil. And when our rights were threatened and our rights march, we raise high the Bonnie Blue flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the Bonnie Blue flag that bears a single star." And then it goes on and mentions each state as it seceded from the Union, like Mississippi being the first. That's what that flag is. Now the national flag, that's actually the Confederate national flag flying here. That's the first national flag. It was adopted in 1861. They went through three from 1861 to 1865 till they got to their final flag. The reason is, if you see that flag on the battlefield, what's that remind you of? It reminds you too much of the American flag which the Union was carrying. So it caused confusion. So in 1863, 2 years later at the time of Gettysburg, this is the flag they adopted. I think they went from bad to worse. Because if you see this on the battlefield, what's that remind you of? Surrender. So finally, 2 years later in 1865, they came up with the last national flag. And it's hanging over there. And all they did was add a red stripe to the bottom of this, making it look less like a flag of surrender. So that would be the last national flag the Confederates would ever have. But it's amazing they went through three of them. Real quickly, I'm going to demonstrate the rifle and let you see what it is. A good man can fire 3 aimed shots from this rifle in a minute. It can be done. As a reenactor, I've seen 4 live rounds fired from this gun in a minute. A lot of practice. But you had to learn from Hardy's tactics in this call. You learned the maneuver of the gun, from quarter arms to shoulder arms, to right shoulder shift. I know all these because I've reenacted so long. You'd also learn all the marching. Columns of 2s, columns of 4, right face, left face. By numbers, 1s and 2s, into the line of battle. You had all these commands and maneuvers you had to learn. And that's what they did. They drilled all the time until they were perfect at it. Because in battle, you want to be good. You want to know what's going on. You don't want to be one of those soldiers out there not knowing the command. Get you killed. So, to learn how to load this rifle, in boot camp, it was called load 9 times by load. You'd be at order arms. When you heard that command, load 9 times load, you bring the gun just like this in front of you. This foot would go back. You had a black box here called a cartridge box. It carried 40 rounds. Paper cartridge with a Manet bullet and about 65 grains of powder inside of it. You would handle cartridge. You grab one of those rounds, you bring it right up here beside the gun. Now to be a good soldier back then, you didn't have to go through the physical training and stuff in the all the medical stuff like we do today. You only had to have 2 teeth, one up here, one down here to bite the cartridge and be able to march 30 miles a day, and you was a soldier. It didn't matter if he was overweight, underweight, or anything. They didn't have birth certificates back then either, so they had no way of knowing your age. That's why a lot of them would lie. Next command would be tear cartridge. You bite the paper top, spit it to the ground, pour it, or bring it right back up here. Next thing is pour, load, round. Pour the powder down in there, seizing that mini ball right here on top, just like a muzzle loader today. Next command is draw rammer, in 2 swift movements. This is known as a ramrod. See, it's cone-shaped to fit the bullet. Next thing would be ram cartridge. You take your ramrod, stick it on the bullet, push that bullet all the way to the bottom, seizing it at the bottom on top of the powder. Next command is return rammer in 2 swift movements. It sits right here in this groove. Now you would think it would be more sensible to put it in the ground when you're fighting. But what happens if you have to move off and you leave that ramrod behind? What's it become? Nothing except maybe for a club, that's about it. Next command is called prime weapon. Nipple to nipple. You bring the nipple of the gun, which is right here, to the nipple of the breast. This is the half cock position. It's safety, nothing will happen. You've heard it, don't go off half cock. That's the half cock position. This is the full cock that's ready to fire. When you're the half cock, you grab a brass cap, which is right here, it's called a percussion cap. You seize that onto the nipple of the gun. When this hammer falls on this, it's going to be like a kid's cat gun. It's going to send a spark down the chamber, igniting the powder, forcing the bullet out. Now, that's prime weapon. At the command ready, you go to full cock position. Then aim and fire. 3 rounds a minute. That gives you 20 seconds to load this and disarm it. There's stories of men who had loaded 5, 6 bullets in here and never fired during the battle because they were so scared they didn't know what they were doing. These barrels get hot. They get up to 500 degrees. So it will burn your fingers if you put your fingers on the barrel. That's after about 10 shots. I know this from being a reenactor because we just fire dry rounds, which is just the powder. That's it. No bullet. We just pour powder in there. We're also known as duck hunters because at close range like this, you would aim the gun way over their heads, so we call this duck hunting. Because you don't want to load it right in their face because there's a flame that comes out about like that. But that's the rifle, and that's how you use it. It weighs about 10 to 12 pounds. Plus you have about 50 other pounds plus wool. Imagine how hot it is in the summer. With that, we're getting ready to go find out our outcome. See if you lived or died. But while we do that, I'm going to meet you right outside this gate, and we're going to stand right there. Because this part of my tour, I call it comedy hour. I will share what I've experienced on other tours and what adult people have asked me. You will get a kick out of it. It's amazing what adult people ask. All right, I'm going to take my stage here. Are you guys sure you're ready for this? Because you will be amazed.
Bring it on.
I've been doing this. These are adult people who drive cars. This is what's scary, okay? I've been asked, how many telephone poles were destroyed during the Battle of Gettysburg? My answer is all of them. They all had to be replaced. You ask me a dumb question, I'm surely going to give you a dumb answer because that's just the way I am. Why isn't there bullet holes in the monuments?
Oh, wow.
Wasn't it nice of them to put the monuments on the battlefield so the soldiers knew where to fight? What do you do with the monuments in the wintertime? Well, they're made of styrofoam, we just move them inside. And we stuff the bullet holes with bubble gum so you can't see it now. This is scary, right? Where's the Alaskan monument? Right beside the Hawaiian, that's what I tell them. Well, what does it look like, sir? Well, it's easy. You can find it out there. Just go look for it. It's got a woman on it with a grass skirt, coconut bra, and a big surfboard right beside her. Can't miss it. They come back. I couldn't find that, sir. Where is that? I just shake my head. questions I get asked. Where did General Lincoln fight? Where did Davy Crockett fight? Where did Daniel Boone fight? Where did the British fight? It amazes me. And here's my favorite. It's July. It's 90 degrees out. Humidity's way up there. I've got sweat running off of me. I'm wearing a wool uniform. And they look at me and say, is it hot in that? So here's my answer I came up with. The women think so. So with that, we'll continue back. What I would like to ask you to do, if you're wearing one of our hats, please take it off and put it back in the haversack. We have had people go off with them on their heads, not on purpose, just forgetting that they had them on their heads. So please return your hat to your haversack at this time, if you would. You take your hat, put it in your haversack for me. Yeah, so we don't forget them. Again, I would like to thank you for coming on my tour. My name is James. If you appreciated the tour and liked it, you can get on our website, farnsworthhouseinn.com. You can tell them James gave a really good tour. Now, if you didn't like my tour so much, my name's Johnny Reb. You've never heard of me. Now, before we cross the street to find out our outcome, posters over. One will say survive, one will say perish. You will match up your name of your soldier, picture of with that gentleman, and see what happened to your soldier. And then I'll have you walk through the bookstore. Please return your haversack and your rifle to where it belongs, and I will meet you out back to greet you and see you off on the bus. Now, we are allowed to accept tips. That's totally up to you. You know, it's not mandatory, it's up to you. So at this time, I'll go ahead and get you across the street so we can find out our outcome.